Hello and welcome to
Type
Talking
will
Film.
spirit me.
People stare at you? Is it because you're a ghost? What's your name? Who said that?
Huh?
Is that Milkman?
Yeah.
Um, have you been on? Have I talked to you before?
Yeah.
What do you? What's? Why do you name yourself? Is this Lorenz Walker?
Yeah.
Why do you call yourself Milkman?
Because I can change my name. It's an
Just to
option,
confuse
so why
me?
not?
Just because you're an NTP? Well, I hope you brought milk enough for everybody. All right, so let's talk about beliefs. Did I already start this thing? Yeah, I did. Hi, Coach Decker, talking to the people with the assembled people's Texas Hayes here, offering good insight into things. Active participant, muchly appreciated. Milkman, aka Lorenz Walker, who is rocking the new name and a fancy new attitude. Also in attendance, one Mr. David here, who is a famous person from before and also currently refamousing himself. And we've got Hami also in attendance here named Akira, and the ENTP who says he's an INTP, Bo. So we also got QB Sauce here. We're going to talk about the question of what is belief. A lot of people want to ask this question, well, do you believe in God? And my answer is, well, belief is indistinguishable from choosing to engage in certain behaviors. So to say I believe in God is not distinguishable from occasionally I participate in some sort of faith-based activity. So if I pray, I believe in God. If I say I believe in God, but I don't engage in any behaviors consistent with faithfulness, then it's meaningless to say I believe, and vice versa. And the problem is that we keep mistaking belief for a position statement. We think that God exists is necessarily so because I believe in God. That I have to agree with the position statement because I agree with the behavior, or I engage in the behavior. But that's not a meaningful way to parse out reality. So that's my initial flurry of words. Let's see what kind of response we get from people.
Well,
So,
go ahead. Go ahead.
oh, there you go.
Okay. Well, I guess that kind of just made me think about taking a position statement or belief. If you believe in ghosts, do you believe in a higher power and or God?
Are you saying I can't both believe in ghosts and not believe in God?
No, not really. I've had a friend that he said, well, if I one day decide that the ghosts are real, then that means there is a higher power. So I guess they could exist on their own planes, but I'm not really sold on if there's ghosts, there is a God. Even though I 100% believe that there is a God, but I don't think they correlate. So I don't really know if they correlate to an afterlife because I don't understand the function of a ghost like that.
I take a very sociological approach to these kinds of things because I've read Max Weber's The Protestant Work Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. And the word spirit, I think, means something that has a form that can be distinguished within nature, that has anything with its own logic within nature has its own form, and it can be worked with within our minds. So I believe it's not about belief, whether we believe in this form, which we can use, but the function of it, so that we can use this mental construct in such a way that it serves its purpose. So it doesn't matter if it's real or not, but rather if it serves the purpose of whatever you're trying to ascribe to it.
Okay.
Okay. Well, that seems like kind of a similar approach to the behavioral approach I'm talking about, except you're talking about it sort of as abstract statuses rather than as a behavior. Josh, you had something to chime in about this?
I mean, just going back to the whole if ghosts and God and vice versa. I mean, I think if one is real, then the probability of the other being real is definitely increased because it would prove that in some fashion the existence of non-physical entities or non-physical beings is possible.
Oh, yeah, okay, I understand that.
Well, but I mean, we already know that's the case because what's a song that exists in your head, you know a tune or something.
But that's not a being.
Well, why isn't it a being? In what way is it different from a being?
It's not personal. The song in your head can't.
Can't do what?
It doesn't have agency outside of you.
Okay, it does, but it has to be triggered, right? It has impact on somebody.
Well, right, but that's different than what I'm describing, right? Like, if you didn't create the song, it would not exist.
Okay, but the point is, it's something that has distinct boundaries and exists in a metaphysical plane, right? That exists beyond whether or not anybody's currently singing it, whether it's playing it currently. That you know that the song Jingle Bells exists as a single defined thing beyond
Yeah, but
anybody's
it's not
rendition
a
of it.
personal being.
And who's
I
to
agree.
say that-
I agree,
And
but
who's
it
to say that the
establishes at least
metaphysical
that entities can exist, whether they're beings or agents or not is a separate question. But it, at least it exists. It establishes that objects of a metaphysical nature exist.
And,
Yeah, I know, I
and
mean, I
who's
agree
to,
that-
Oh wait, can I say something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And who's to say that the metaphysical plane isn't subject to the distinctions of the physical plane? It's like how a software would be developed on a hardware device, but it has to be functioned by the hardware computer rather than just the abstract that that has no form.
I think that claim is self-defeating, right? Because if you were to say the only truths are ones that are physically or scientifically verifiable, that statement is itself an example of a truth that is not grounded in sensory perception. Right? That
But your
statement
truth-
is true absent
your
scientific
truth-
verification.
Your truth relies upon the metaphysical, which is constructed from the physical itself. So you're not separated from the physical in any way.
Okay, so the statement all bachelors are unmarried is true independent of anything physical.
Yeah, but you're ascribing it to an object which has
Right,
meaning.
you need knowledge of those objects to understand that it's true.
So you need an object. You need
Yeah.
You need objectivity.
It's well, that's
But it's equally so that you need agency for objective things to exist objectively.
so.
You can't imagine a reality that's unobserved, so they're equally, they're supervening upon each other.
So, like for example, the claim A is equal to B is equal to C, therefore A is equal to C, is like an a priori truth. It describes a mode of being, not anything physical, right? Even if we don't understand what A and B and C are, that statement still expresses something true about the way they relate to one another in an ontological sense.
Yeah, but I don't like counterproductive terminology when you use a priori as if it's something that needs its own, like that no longer needs justification for its existence. I think everything needs to be verified under pretenses.
All right. Well, think about it a different way. Think about it as there are two elements here. There's skeleton, and then there's leaves and berries and shit, right? And so the problem is we're talking about different things. On the one hand, structurally, truth comes from grammar. So we can have grammatically necessary truths that are unavoidably valid and sound because they're tautologies, basically. And then you're saying, yeah, but I don't like how inflexible that is. Well, we have to understand that its utility has to be factored in with intention of agency, because agency is the source of all such reality, including the one we are currently engaging in.
I mean, it's just I think there's a distinction between a priori truths, or truths which come from meaning, and a posteriori blah 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 truths which are derived from sensory perception. It might be the case that, so for example, the statement "it is wrong to cause unjust harm" is true if you know the meanings of the word unjust and harm. The statement "it is wrong to burn innocent people" requires that you understand that burning is a form of harm, and that knowledge could only come from like a sensory experience.
There's a quote I like by Max Weber that says, every concrete description bears the resemblance of artistic portrayal, so that every form of rationalization still is subject to the metaphysical framework by which it's encapsulated, which is a reductive meaning-based like value taken from objective systems. So you have to use your own mind to reduce these values into these words so that you can make these categorizations themselves.
That seems to be an argument against, like, physical positivism, right?
Yeah.
Because the conclusion would just be that, like, reality is grounded in, like, internally consistent metaphysical frameworks, not, like, empirical facts about the world that we can, like, observe and learn.
Well, I think once again it fails to understand that the fundamental mechanism at play here is that quantum mechanism of to know all of one way, you have to not know any of the other way. That the things are this inverse proportionality mechanism that reflects at all levels of from subatomic to macro. That is the thing that makes these arguments about which side or the other ridiculous because they necessitate the other one, but they necessitate the other one be rendered static so you can talk about the other side as being fluid.
Yeah, I think sensory perception is kind of a sham.
I just think you're in a loop of self-consciousness that has no base, and I think that base needs to be created.
I'm not self-conscious, man.
No, not like
I'm
as
kidding. No, I understand what you're saying.
You think that because you're an ENTP. That's how we feel about it. We feel like we don't actually exist because our SI is in the fourth slot.
I mean, I forgot what we were talking. I forgot what I was going to say, but something to the effect of empiricism is one way of knowing things, but it is inferior in its explanatory power to analytic truths, which are unequivocally true.
I
And
think the language
also,
you're using
all the
is
cool
trying
talk
to
about
is
metaphysical
trying to
shit.
abstract from real things. The
What was
language
that?
you're using is trying to abstract from real things, and that you're just weighing them on an interest base that you're trying to conceive yourself on the better half of.
Well, but look, that's not. We're trying to impact to do the exact opposite. In my opinion, what a sound metaphysical thinker does is say, we've got legitimate normative questions about what I ought to do in my life that are both pragmatic and moral, issues of moral agency. That these things exist
Yes,
is indisputable. Whether or not we
I
want to
don't
frame
believe-
them in an
I
abstraction
don't
that makes it fair and just is another matter entirely. If we do, we want to focus on universality.
I don't believe I exist independently, though. I am part of nature itself, and that it creates me rather than I create it.
I don't think that's mutually exclusive with any of the things we're saying.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Right? It's a question of whether it's a question of which belief system is more sound, faith in analytical grammatical truths or faith in sensory perception.
It's not why are you trying to weigh them as if they're equivalent, though, or as if you're trying to judge them
They're not
on a
equivalent.
basis.
Analytic
though.
truth is better.
Okay, well let's
That
change.
isn't. I don't think that's true, though. I think
Let's-
that's based on that's an unobjective means of observing things. That's a value-oriented system rather than an objective system.
Let's look at it. To change the words from the words that we're using, which are kind of mushy, to principalism versus particularism. Are you arguing in favor of particularism?
I have been for a while now, but
Okay, so you're arguing in favor of complete arbitrary decision making that allows more coercion and justifies just about anything if the arguments are good. You're arguing
not
in favor of an
necessarily. I think
ENTP
you don't
nightmare
have
world.
to. I just think the options should remain open, and that we have to take the prerogative at first. The first thing you take is the prerogative, and then you make out with the principles, make up with the principles of what you should do afterwards.
That's how you act because of your cognitive function stack. It's not how you're supposed to act.
I don't care.
That seems to collapse the distinction between is and ought. And I also don't think that that is really responsive to what I'm saying.
Right, it's not responsive at all
I
because
think both of them
we're
exist. I
talking
think
about the
Hegel's long
correctness
proved
of a
those
system.
distinctions to be irrelevant under the unification of idea itself.
What was that?
I think Hegel long disproved these like dualistic interpretations of under the synthesis of idea itself, that we can have these abstractions which we work with, but not have to weigh them on a basis of something else.
Well, if that's the case, then why should we listen to you at all?
Because you see the values which I'm
No, you
ascribing
just
to
destroyed all the
reality,
meaning in
and
your
then
arguments.
you
I don't
use
ascribe to
those
that, but you
values.
do. Okay, I don't ascribe to
Huh?
that, but you do. So you're subject to your own framework. Under your own framework, none of your sentences mean anything. Now listen, I don't ascribe to your framework, so my sentences still mean shit. So you lose.
But you have to take in values.
Your sentences don't mean anything. Remember, you just destroyed meaning for your side, not mine.
But the very fact that you're taking in the value that they're meaningless is a
Your
value in
sentences
itself.
don't have any meaning. Remember, it doesn't matter what you say because you destroyed meaning.
You're making a value judgment. You're making
I'm
a value
not.
judgment.
I don't
You're not even
understand.
saying any words.
I don't understand how, like, saying, like, all bachelors are unmarried, like, suggesting that statement is necessarily true. How does that make any sort of a value judgment?
No, what he's saying does.
What?
That all of it's meaningless. That my sentences are meaningless just because of your value of it.
No, I'm saying you're trying
I-
to
it-
dismiss. Hey,
independently
stop!
of your
Stop and
judgment.
actually listen for
I-
a second. Stop and listen.
My statements exist independently of your judgment.
Stop and listen and learn something for a second, okay?
Yeah.
Now look, you're trying to negate one of my points, right? That's what you're trying to do with Hegel. You're saying, no, Eric, I'm going to reduce your arguments to something that's functionally meaningless because I'm not winning the point when I'm arguing the other side of the meaning you're arguing. And so I'm
Just because
saying,
you don't understand it.
I'm saying to you specifically, no, I disagree with your negation. Here's why it's wrong. The reason it's wrong is because you're using a skepticism kind of objection, saying, no, the meaning you're making isn't real meaning, blah, 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 blah. Here's why. It's just a matter of
I'm
these
not
subjective
making that
things.
at all.
It's, okay, then explain to me your point on the Hegel. In which way did it negate what I was talking about?
That ideas exist independently of the being, so that you don't need to. You have to have a physicality for that idea to take place. That has to have a subject.
That has nothing to do with anything we're talking about.
That also seems contradictory, right? If ideas are...
It has to do with what I said in the first place, what I said before.
Which is what? How is this response to anything we're
What you
saying?
said between the distinction between ought and is, that it's not a objective distinction you're trying to make, but a value-oriented one.
Well, first off, I don't really understand how this is responsive to what we're saying, but why is it the case that value judgments can't be objective?
Because they are inherently based in
Is
the subject.
racism bad? Is murdering babies bad?
I think that's completely indifferent to nature.
That doesn't answer
I'm
the
not
question.
nature.
Can we
I'm
come to
not
objective conclusions about those axiological questions? Is it bad
No,
to rape
it's
people?
It's not objective. Doing that
It's
is
not
not
objective?
objectively bad.
So you think there is some possibility that it's morally permissible to rape children?
I mean, I'm not saying that that's a thing that should be done. That is
I
not
think-
a should to be that.
Sure.
but
Why
it's a
can't
possibility that
ought
exists
claims
in
be
nature.
objective?
Nature is completely indifferent to those things.
Why are we relying on a naturalistic fallacy to adjudicate
Yeah.
the issue?
It's not natural because there is something called nature which is beyond us.
Okay, so in nature, animals do whatever the fuck they want. They kill each other. They rape each other. Should we model our
You are not
behavior off
nature.
of that?
You are not nature.
What am I then?
You are a effect of nature, but you are subject.
I fail to see how this indicts my belief that logic is a sound way producing knowledge, or how this proves that claims such as murdering innocent people is bad.
I just think your
Are in any way
axioms are
subjective.
based on objective truths rather than independent of themselves.
How does that substantiate the claim that what is natural is the supreme test of what is
It's
true.
not the supreme test. I think that subjective values can compete with one another completely. I like that. I like that.
Okay, my
idea of-
subjective value is that slavery is good. Is that as legitimate as a belief to the contrary?
I think that my belief that I should be able to kill you for that belief is just as valid then.
That doesn't really seem to answer my question. So you
So that my abolitionism against your slavery can be competed against it, but still valid.
Now, what if you're trying to abolish my ability to hire somebody? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Well, what's, I mean, explain what he's doing to him, please.
Yeah, I don't really know.
He's just shifting ground.
It seems to me that, so if it's the case that everything is subjective, is it objectively true that everything is subjective?
Yeah, that's where I was getting at.
Well, right, but to suggest that everything is subjective necessitates that you make an objective statement. It also seems to
It's not
contradict
that-
what you said about 10 minutes ago when you were saying
not
that, like, objectivity is...
It's not everything is subjective, it's that a subject has to be independent of its particulars before it becomes a universal subject. So before you identify with yourself and the whole, and identifying with the whole is when you become a universal subject.
Yeah, I don't really know what that means.
Why would your identification with the universal law render you either subject or not subject to it? Why?
Because you
the way
can't
you're
create
saying-
values.
Listen,
You
the way
can't
you're
create
saying
values
it-
independent of nature unless you're a subject.
But listen to me. The way you're saying it is I have to concede that I'm subject to a law before I'm subject to the law. And if it's true that's the case, then basically if I don't agree that I don't have a burden not to smother that newborn because it's crying too much, then I don't have that burden. I can just go ahead and do it. I don't agree to that. Or I don't believe in
I
that.
believe
Or whatever.
facing that burden is an important thing we should do, but I don't think that's
Important in what
inherent
regard,
thing.
right? If it's not an objective mandate, why is it important?
I don't think this is just because it's the very word important implies a value.
That
So-
that doesn't prove though that value can't be objective.
I know, it's not that it can't be objective, but it can be important, that we can use it. That value can be a tool.
Let's use different words. Absolute or relative. You're making claims that these values, that because they're values, they're relative. They're relative to your cultural understanding, your expectations, or some other garbage like that, right?
Not
But that's
necessarily.
not
Some
true.
things are
It's exactly the opposite of what we're saying, and you failed to establish it at all.
I'm not saying that some values can't be objective, or we can't get them from objectivity, but you have to have a subject to interpret them.
Well, listen, what you're saying is you have to be a living human to care about this shit. Okay, duh. Dead humans don't care, animals don't care about it. Fine, I get that. Now, can we actually talk about the thing that we're talking about, or are you just trying to scramble back to such minuscule ground that you can't actually be pinned down as being wrong about anything?
It's not about being wrong or right, Phil. It's
My
about what we're
ass!
trying
It's
to
not about being wrong. You spent the whole last fucking bunch of time telling us we're wrong.
That to suggest that it's not about being right or wrong is exactly
I don't
why.
care about who's right or wrong. I like being open-minded and being open to new theories and like changing them.
Okay, fine. We get you want to be able to advocate sides that aren't correct or whatever. Fine, get that.
I mean, I was arguing that ghosts were real a couple seconds ago, but you know,
You could have won that one, though, maybe.
Does this start from the notion that ideas can exist in your head and still be, a part of reality versus, things that are physical? I guess I think that's what the conversation is on.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
All right, are we done with this topic? That's a good link for a video. That was good. I bet. I don't know. People might think it was harsh. There may be plenty of audience members who felt like Bo got ganged up a little bit on. I meant to say out of Dash's way, but I couldn't help but chime in periodically.
Yeah, it was a good joust.
It was, Bo. Hey, as before,
Yeah, that was fun.
you
Thank
give
you.
no quarter. You're making bad arguments, but you're giving no quarter. I'll tell you that. And you know how to scramble. You know how to scramble with the best of them. So, okay. Thanks for watching Talking with Ben, people.